And you have the floor, sir.
Hi, what you have before you, stapled together, is just a summary of the department budget, including the ZBA, Planning Board, and Conservation Commission. And the second thing you have is simply an update of the last few pages of this document, because Dave and I were reviewing this as we were sitting and waiting, and we noticed that there were a couple things that needed to be added, so Brenda was kind enough to run some copies and bring them down to us.
Would I be correct in saying that they were not here in the December 15th edition that we have?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
You're correct, Mr. Chairman.
Correct.
Thank you.
Now, you'll find that pretty much all of the line items for the budget, most of them are consistent with what you'll see in the December 15th version. But in going through them, there were some areas that that myself and staff felt needed to be edited. For instance, under town planner expenses, other professional services, we knocked that down a little bit to $2,500 because we figured, $2,815 may be a little bit excessive. This line item simply covers things that might not fall under the purview of a 53G outside peer review consultant or town council services. For instance, when a project like Wareham Crossing goes in, there may be something that is outside those two realms, maybe historic artifacts, something within a historic district that may fall outside of those two, may fall between the cracks outside of those two areas. It may not be something that gets utilized, but again, there are things that come up that are unforeseen when a project comes forward. Legal services, it started to become the policy during my time here that each department's budget, that legal services would be funded out of there. So in speaking to Dave and Brenda and us putting our heads together, we put in a line item for about $2,500 because I can think of instances where something comes up where I need to pick up the phone and confer with town council briefly on something. There were a couple approval not required plans that came across my desk a few weeks ago prior to this last planning board meeting that were a little bit legally complicated. So I may need to make a 10-minute phone call to town council just to say, hey, am I thinking the right way on this? I want to make sure that we're doing things legally correct.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just also put a footnote on that, and John's absolutely correct. We're trying to get the cost center to identify specialty needs. We have a flat fee legal services contract that any department head or committee or commission is able to use following a specific policy or asking the town administrator for assistance. And in many cases, John, for instance, on Walmart, there's a separate legal retention account that Walmart, through the process, is paying us for the services of Mark Bobrowski. So we'll use the flat fee first, and then if there is a specialty need where there might be an ongoing project for some years that we have counsel, we now have to close out that part of some written opinion or something in court, that's what the $2,500 is for.
Thank you for clarifying.
And there are instances in the case of Walmart where a good chunk of Mark Bobrowski's services are being paid for by the applicant through the 53G process. Mm-hmm. But as Mark said, there are some communications, some services that fall outside of that.
Yeah, and on free lot, just one last point, people may or may not know on the committee, but we have free lot Thursday or Friday where town council is available, so a department head could stroll on the hallway and ask council for, some advice on a matter. It doesn't cost a dime because it's on the flat fee. But if it's something more specific, some environmental issue or something that has gone on for years, that it would actually cost the town more to get our council, up to speed. What the department's done here is put that best estimate forward.
And then there's $240 for cellular. Currently, I don't have a work cell phone, so that would be something I know the conservation agent has one. The Board of Health Director has one, so it'd be something that if it could be fit within the budget, that would be a good thing to have. Other purchase services, again, we rounded down where we trimmed where we could. That's simply our contracts for maintenance of and repair of copy machines, fax, typewriter repair, water cooler, things of that nature. All office supplies, we estimated about $100 per month. That's about $1,200. And any other supplies we may need, such as that fall out of regular supplies, such as office furniture, file cabinets, things of that nature. We added in $1,200 for gas, diesel, and oil because it also came to my attention that at the end of each fiscal year, whatever gas that we use to fill up the town vehicle that we use comes out of our budget. So that it's important that there's a line item in there to cover that. We estimated about $100 per month, and in talking to Dave this morning, since, to tell you the truth, in the usage of the vehicle, I'd say the percentage between myself and Dave using the town vehicle is probably 75% conservation, 25% planning. I do go out on occasional site visits and things of that nature, but Dave goes out more regularly than I do. So that's usually how the usage is split up. But we estimate about $100 per month should cover that expense. Travel reimbursement, again, $200 for conservation. Again, Dave uses the town vehicle probably 95% of the time. There are rare occasions that he may have to attend a conference or a seminar, and it isn't prudent to use the town vehicle. But that's fairly rare, I would say, right? Yeah. So we figured $200 for conservation, $1,785 for the town planner. Conferences, that's for attendance at conferences and seminars. Advertising, that's simply a that's a normal line item where the planning board is required to run certain legal advertisements in the papers for certain things. And $8,014, that is a carryover from previous town meeting, I believe 2 or 3 years ago. Remaining funds for zoning bylaw and subdivision rules and regs rewrite, and we are currently tapping into that money. We have retained the services of engineer Charles Rowley. Because there was no town planner for 2.5 years, we wanted to make sure that any zoning bylaw amendment that had been passed at town meeting has made it into the zoning bylaws as it was approved by the Attorney General's office. So Charles Rowley is in the process. He's done some research with the town clerk's office, and he's in the process of updating our zoning bylaws as we speak. So we'll have a nice, clean, new, updated copy of the zoning bylaws probably in the next 2 months or so. And when we get down to planning board expenses, again, printing and mailing, we've knocked that down from $1,800 all the way down to $800. As you can see, it's down from $2,000 in FY 2011. Town meeting advertisement, again, has been knocked way down. It was $3,000 a couple years ago. It's down to $1,300. Again, planning board office supplies, $1,200. Other supplies has been knocked back down to $1,000 after going up last year for transcription machine, typewriters, printers. Travel reimbursement, $500 for planning board members. Again, this is something I've spoken to the planning board about really being frugal with this. But there are instances where planning board members will attend conferences, seminars, meetings, things of that nature. And again, under legal services, similar to up above, we've added a line item for about $1,200 for legal services. The planning board doesn't require legal services as much as myself or the zoning board of appeals. So $1,200 should be sufficient for them, but there are times, for instance, where at a planning board meeting, planning board will request town council opinion on a matter and ask me to follow up with town council on something. So naturally, if they ask me to do something, I'll do it for them.
And once again, Mr. Chairman, following the same policies and procedures that we talked about earlier, using the flat fee first, and if there's anything specialized that would require approval, that it get that approval either through the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator.
And, in looking at some of these light items, $2,500, $1,200, it's really amazing with the fees that attorneys charge, how quickly that gets used. It really does. It's surprising, and it's not unique to any individual attorney or attorneys. It's just one of those things. Again, $1,000 for continued training affiliated with planning, down from $1,500 a couple years ago. So total expenses for the planning board have come down from $10,000 to $7,000 over the last couple of years. Now with the zoning board of appeals, again, advertising, zoning board of appeals is legally required to advertise for certain projects, so that's an important line item for them to have. And also $300 for conferences. Again, $300 is not a lot of money. You know, if you attend a conference, it may cost you anywhere from $30, $50, $60. So that's not a lot of money, but it should cover what they need. And again, $200 for travel reimbursement. As you can see, the zoning board of appeals budget has come down from almost $4,200 to $1,500. Now we have highlighted a new line item for legal services, and again, as far as the ZBA concerned, that is a unique situation, because the ZBA has typically utilized the services of Attorney John Whitten as special counsel for affordable housing projects, 40B projects, and that's one thing where we're working with the ZBA on, is to try and control their costs as far as legal services. Now, in talking as a department, a likely recommended amount for that line item would probably be $2,500 to $3,000. Although one thing where, again, we've been working with Mr. Andrews on this, is trying to control the legal costs of the zoning board of appeals. And I mean, the receipt that Brenda showed me this morning on how much of a legal cost the ZBA has run up is over $13,000 this last year. So it's something that is a concern, and it's something that we're trying to work to resolve.
Mr. Chairman, the zoning board, the planning board, any other board or commission needs to follow the same rules, and we're working to reemphasize that as the flat fee for town council is the primary mode of use. And in some cases, there might be specialized use or specialized attorneys' services, but it has to come through the regular process as any other request would from any other department.
And what I'm trying to reemphasize, and Mark's comment is an excellent one, is what I'm trying to reemphasize with the boards is, with the budget situation the way it is, in fact, I'm preparing a memo saying that, you know, pretty much if everything goes well, we'll be level funded. Therefore, any expense that the ZBA or the planning board incurs in terms of conferences, seminars, mileage reimbursement, as far as contact with special town council, really needs prior approval from the planning department first, because let's face, you know, and it's, you know, it's very easy. It's very easy to go beyond your budget when you're contacting town council, because every issue is an important issue, and you sit there as a board member and say, well, we need an opinion on this, we really, really do. But then when you start seeing the fees that come in for all these different opinions, kind of like your budget at home, it's the little things that add up over time. So we're really trying to, you know, really emphasize frugality and being conservative with the contact of special town council in this case. And I will let Dave speak from the conservation side, since he's really much more familiar with their needs.
Thank you. The conservation line items that you see really are a reestablishment of these line items from previous fiscal year budgets. The prior town accountant had taken those line items and sort of lumped them in with the town planner's line items so that they weren't specifically separated out, and we simply took that money and recreated those line items so they're more clearly understood as to what those funds are being used for. And as you can see, they're relatively modest numbers for office supplies, conferences, and travel reimbursement, and is essentially the same amount of money that we had in the previous fiscal year that was lumped into the general town planner's budget. So it's just a reestablishment of those line items. Beyond that, we really don't have significant line item expenses, so that's essentially what that is in reference to. The other issue we do have, and again, there's no number associated with it, is legal services. As we've heard already, we try to utilize town council as is set up, but you never know when there's a circumstance that may arise that's outside of the realm of general town council. So we haven't included a number there, but we think that possibly that should be looked at, so in case there is an issue that needs some sort of special counsel, that can be accounted for. Thank you.
Questions? Mr. Trudell?
To the town planner, if I might. I see you have $30,000 allocated to a part-time planner.
That actually was an item, I'll let Mr. Andrews speak to that, because that was an item that was added in, by the town administrator.
Thank you.
It is a part-time position that we have looked at, particularly in the area of planning. When we broke out the position and split the town planner's services with the town of Rochester, it's a residual amount, David, that was left over through Mr. Chairman for what I'd say, a different type of planner. Somebody who is more focused on working with CEDAR, myself, and the Board of Selectmen on economic development issues, on tracking issues relative to economic programs, working with businesses. So it's a little bit different of a position. We haven't fully fleshed it out yet, but it's the residual that was left over from the position when we shared John's services with the town of Rochester for the contract that he has.
It would be your intention to fill that job this year?
Well, it is an interesting time. The Board of Selectmen voted last night to meet on Saturday, which I will be there, screening some 28 candidates for our Director of CEDA. Mr. Sanborn has served the town well. I thank him for his services. We haven't missed a beat relative to our grant, our mini entitlement grant with the State Department of Housing and Community Development. But you know what? I'd like to get a full-time director in, take a step back, take a pause, and maybe that director has some background in economic development that might put that town assistant planner issue to rest, and we don't need to fill the position. Maybe that person doesn't. Maybe it's more focused on, it's difficult to get a person that's balanced between planning and development. And as you know, we're trying to run at a number of projects in town, major projects, John, that you've worked on, with 80 Makepeace for Rosebrook Business Park, for expansion of other areas of town, the Walmart project,
The Bog Wind.
the Bog Wind project. But if you separated out the economic issues and said to this assistant or whatever, run with this and work with the director of CEDA to get as many businesses relocated to town or expanded in town, that would be the intention that I have at least.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, Mrs. Brown?
Mr. Andrews, it just doesn't make any sense. You know, when we sell the town regionalization, we're looking for regionalization, and we get a part-time planner now, and then we want to bring on another part-time planner. It just doesn't sit well with me. It just doesn't. Why don't we make Mr. Shino a full-time planner? If that's what we need, that's what we need. But we went to the town and said, we're saving, we're doing this, we're doing that. Now we're going to come back and say, well, geez, now we need a part-time planner that specializes in this and that, and it just doesn't sit well with me.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree, and I understand your point of view. I didn't say that we couldn't make John full-time. I said that we need to get the full-time CEDA director in place, and then to assess the skill sets that that individual has, so that we can do. I really want to march forward, Donna, with a real strong business development plan, one that uses regional offices. I'm not going to put John on the spot, but God bless you. When was the last time we contacted the Massachusetts Office of Business Development to do some work with the planning department to expand a local business and get a small business loan? Probably not in the past 6 or 8, 10, 12 months. Peter has worked hard, but the idea would be to get that full-time CEDA director in, take a step back, as I said, take a pause, maybe we need a full-time planner, given the fact that we've got a lot of plans working towards the end right now. So I'm not ruling that out.
Okay.
I'm just saying that it's a residual that was left over, because I look at on the town side, and, I don't see a whole lot. I want to see more economic activity, assisting businesses, get permitted, get their business plans together, maybe even going to a local bank, going to a loan pool, and helping represent the town in promoting a loan for, a business that wants to expand or a new business that wants to come to town. So I'm not ruling anything out at this point.
Any other questions, Mr. McDonald?
You mentioned a minute ago residual, you keep saying it's a residual amount. I'm a little confused on residual, because I guess per contract, we own a certain percentage of Mr. Charbonneau, correct? So where's the residual?
It's the amount left over, Larry, through you, Mr. Chairman. So John makes per his contract $36,000 here.
To the town?
That's correct. And he gets also paid for 2 days in Rochester.
Right.
So what was left over in a position that you would call the assistant planner is the amount of dollars
So
left.
technically, it really isn't a residual amount, it's a new encumbrance we're trying to do.
I'm sorry, I disagree with you. Let me tell you why. We had a town planning position.
Right.
We approached the town of, Chairman Barrett actually tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know what, I think Rochester's looking for a town planner. Picked up the phone, I called Rich LaCamera there, and he said, yes, we are. We formed a committee, we went up to Rochester, we talked with them, we interviewed a half dozen candidates. We selected Mr. Charbonneau jointly with the town of Rochester. So our amount that we would pay for his salary is the 36,
Right.
and then the 30 that's left over, which would otherwise have been in the line for the full-time planner.
Maybe it's just our terminology difference, because that's when we went to, I see what you're saying. If
Yes.
we had a full-time, this
Yes.
is what would cost us.
That's
But-
correct.
But when we agreed to that 36, that's what we put in at town meeting, everybody voted on. So to me, there was no residual. We basically entered an agreement with the part-time planner. And now you're wanting another part-time planner, and I understand that, because I see what you're saying, that what we really need is a full-time planner, is what you're saying, basically.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that the position, it's been in the budget. It's not, it's like we passed one position and not the
My
other.
first time looking at the
I'm just
budget.
saying, 11, 12, and 13, it's in the budget, and we may not have to use the money, and for that purpose, and the town may come to the conclusion that, you know what, we've got so many projects, because, John, I mean, a lot of this stuff came on the radar after we hired you, right?
The AD Makepeace stuff, the last two
Bogwind.
medical buildings, the mixed use, Walmart relocation, Bogwind.
Okay. Well, I'm not disagreeing, I was just
Yeah.
trying to get my hands around residual, because to me, that means that's something that we kind of set aside, and we've been, I guess it's just a
Sure,
terminology problem.
it's just probably semantical.
Yeah.
Mr. Paulson?
The legal came up here in several different contexts, and I'm as thrifty as anybody in terms of trying to save the town money. But we had, not too many years ago, we were running the legal bills in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, primarily because we were viewed as having very poor zoning laws and very poor enforcement of the zoning laws we had. So we wound up in court because developers knew that we were a target, and they came after us. It seems to me that maybe instead of spending $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year being frugal, then maybe we should go to our lawyers and say, look, we need a total revamp of all of our laws. Forget the current budget. If we have to spend, I'll pick a figure out of the air. We have to spend an extra $100,000.
it's not-
If I might.
I'm sorry.
If we have to spend an extra $100,000 to get this right, however you're going to define right, so that we don't have to face the problem in 3 or 4 years that we're spending $10,000 a year, $10,000 a year, and suddenly we have another $500,000 bill. And you mentioned some new things coming on that could have been anticipated, they're here, and maybe if we spent the money ahead of time, I'm not saying we're going to have problems with Walmart, I'm just suggesting, or the others, that if we spent the money ahead of time, would be all set.
Well, Mr. Paulson, that's a good point you bring up, and it's not about the bylaws we have. Enforcement is the key word you hit on. I remember when I first started, there was an inspector in the building department. When one of my staff approached him about a question on the zoning bylaws, the response was, "I don't have a copy of our zoning bylaws. I've never read our zoning bylaws." So enforcement is a big issue. That's the key right there, is enforcement of the zoning bylaws, and I agree with you.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Sorry we...
Still morning, barely, but hopefully mine is one of the easier presentations. Guess we'll find out momentarily. What?
They always say that.
All right, okay, so
We are addressing budget issues.
I'll retract it
All right, we are
then.
addressing the budget issues, and we're running way behind, so if you would stay focused.
Okay. So, our budget request from the town's operating budget for fiscal year 2013 is zero. That's $0. Community and Economic Development Authority has been a self-sustaining department of the town, and it derives its funds primarily from community development block grants and from income from real estate assets that CETA owns, Bay Point Country Club, portion of land over there that's leased to the Bay Point Country Club, and a property over at 4 Recovery Road, and the balance is from what we call program income, which is repayments from prior grant activities that CETA has administered. CETA's primary activity is administering the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program. Currently, as shown on the sheet, we are currently administering 2 of them for $1 million each. The town filed an application in mid-December for the fiscal 2012 grant for $900,000. That is expected to be awarded to the town in the spring. The 2 prior grants were $1 million each. Because of a reduction of funding of this program at the federal level by Congress, it's a HUD program whose money passes through the state, through the state's Department of Housing and Community Development. They have reduced the prospective grant from $1 million to $900,000 for the next grant. The town is virtually assured of getting this grant. It's because of its demographics and socioeconomic indicators. It's actually in a special category designated by the state, that whereas most communities access these grants on a competitive basis, Wareham is one of 10 smaller, mid-sized communities that are virtually assured this funding on an annual basis. Now, the state could change that policy at any time. So these funds we expect to be forthcoming to the town. And this FY12 grant, the grants are normally 15 to 18 months long, so the state is telling us that this next grant for $900,000 should start in April. I'm skeptical, frankly, but if it does, it would continue through late calendar year 2013. The other major significant program that CETA operates is the DEP's Title V Septic Repair Program, which is a revolving loan program. We're now administering round 6. These are funded at $200,000 each. These make low-interest loans to property owners to repair their septic systems or to abandon their septic systems and connect into the sewer system. And right now, this program started in early 2011. Right now, we're about 2/3 of the way through that program. The town has annually or semi-annually received new funding at increments of $200,000. So presumably, there'd be around 7 programs that the town would be applying and requesting funds for during the current calendar year. This is revolving loan funds. The town is able to retain a very modest administrative fee of $5,000 per year for this. The balance of the funds go out as direct loans, low-interest loans to property owners for septic repairs or sewer hookups, sewer connections. So I know I'd like to try to contribute to get you back on schedule, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Aaron, just read it out.
Currently, when you say there's low-interest loans on the septic repair and sewer connection, what's the current rate of percentage that we're charging the personnel to take those loans?
The 3 or 6%, depending on the person's income status. So the higher amounts, actually not all that attractive right now. But
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Paulson?
GATRA, I see you have 2 programs here that we participate in.
right.
And I see the buses going by, and they're oftentimes empty. And I'm a curious soul by nature, and I'm wondering just how we get involved with the scheduling of those buses, or is that handled regionally? What if anything can be done, and what are the 2 programs? What do they cost us per year?
We don't get involved in the scheduling. That's a GATRA operational issue. I think certain routes are heavily subscribed, other routes are not heavily subscribed, is my understanding. There was a CETA board meeting on Monday night. We were actually talking about this. Programs that are directly being funded through the grant is the Owl Pass program, the Onset Wareham Link, the bus, where low-income persons qualify for a free pass. They could be a monthly pass or it could be a weekly pass. So it's basically, we distribute passes to them. The other program that's directly funded by the grant is what we call the Out-of-Town Medical Transportation Assistance Program. This is for low-income seniors and low-income persons with disabilities who need transportation outside of town to Boston, to New Bedford, to various VA facilities. I'd say Boston, Brockton VA, Boston VA, various Boston medical facilities, and New Bedford and Dartmouth are the most frequent places. Basically, it's providing transportation. There's a contract with GATRA that basically pays them for this out-of-town service. CETA funding subsidizes this. This program's operated by the Council on Aging.
There, if I might just pursue this for one more moment on this question. There was, and probably it may still be, bus service from different locations here in town to the train in Middleborough.
That's right.
Is that still in place?
As far as I know, we're not funding that.
In other words, it's not in place or you're not funding it?
We are not, it's in place, but that's not something that we are funding.
I'm curious, who controls that? And actually, I'll ask a question, even though you may not be able to answer it. I'm curious if there's any, let's say, money made from that at all. Does anybody know?
I'm not really familiar with it. I mean, I know that, as you may very well know, while GATRA provides these services, the vans, the OWL service is actually operated by Churchill Transportation. My understanding is they even own the vehicles, and they have a contract with GATRA.
I guess the question should be addressed to the town administrator. What does it cost, or do we know? Do we have any idea, Mark, as to?
Mr. Chairman, I'd have to get some information on that. You know, I know, I've dealt with Frank Gay from GATRA on expansion of routes, but I don't know, I don't top of my head what the costs are.
The other question I have, and it'll be my final question. Agawam Village improvements.
Yep.
We have different entities providing, CETA obviously, state, another entity providing funds to Agawam Village, and then periodically the CPC. Have the three entities gotten together to say, all right, if we're going to rehab the Agawam Village, and it's going to cost whatever it costs in the aggregate over a 5-year period of time, that everybody is going to have to step in and say, this is what we're going to provide. It could be a comprehensive plan provided by the housing authority. They have to do that, but then it would seem to me that it would be worthwhile for these three entities, there may be more, to get together with that plan in hand and say, here's what we can do, here's what we can do.
I don't want to certainly speak on for the housing authority, but I can speak to what this funding represented, and it represented exactly that. This was a combination, this project, which is now essentially complete and expended, was to do exterior improvements. The building, you've seen one building over there has been redone. This project was done with grant funds, with the 2011, I believe it was, CPA appropriation, could have been 2010. We actually coordinated, and in fact, CETA, at the request of the CPC committee, took the lead in sort of being the fiduciary agent for them in carrying out this project. So they had $50,000 in it. We had $100,000 of grant funds in it. We made a further commitment of $50,000 from program income, and there was $26,000 of state funds in there. They have, what the Housing Authority has, what's called formula funding grant of modernization funds that's available to them. They have that budgeted out over I believe it's a 5-year period. It's a modest amount of money in comparison to what the capital needs are, both for Agawam and Redwood, but they do have funding. So we had hoped to be able to include them for additional funding in this grant application that went in December, but we just simply weren't able to fit it into the budget. So right now, our participation with them was a one-time event.
Okay, well, that answers the question, thank you.
Mr. McDonald.
I guess I'm becoming a curious soul too. I didn't realize I was. Agawam Village, as an example, when you have, listen, entitlement, I hate using that word, but that's what it is, it's an entitlement. Do they come to you, people out there, say like Agawam Village, they come to you and apply to CETA? It's not something you approach them, they apply to you, is that correct?
That's right. When we start putting a grant together on an annual basis, we let various agencies know. We've started the planning for the grant. We have we have a public participation process. Their request preceded me coming here. It happened under with the prior CETA director. So my understanding is they approach CETA saying we want funding, the same way they've approached CPC requesting funding.
That leads me into my next question, because I noticed, the one thing I noticed on here is public social services.
Yep.
And how much it's been reduced. Is that also because people have not applied, or for whatever reason, you just haven't received the applications? I mean, I realize that there's a reduction in the amount that was available to the town, but is that also an issue in that area there?
We have a limitation. I'll get directly to you.
Okay.
We have a limitation as to how much social services we can include in any grant. That's a limitation imposed on by the state. But beyond that, it was really, it was in part due to the reduced funding this year.
Okay.
It was also in part, there were really three things. There was the reduced funding, there were competing projects,
Right.
we also took a hard look at programs that are funded right now. How far will their existing funding commitments carry them through? And right now, some of the projects that are funded either directly with a grant or with program income, some of them will carry through calendar 2012. A few of them will even go into 2013. So, yes, there's a need, but we also didn't want to get backlogged with money, because one other aspect of these grants is the town has spending requirements. The state expects a certain percent of a grant will be expended in order to qualify it for the next one. So this doesn't by any means show a reduced need, and I would think it's very possible that the next grant application, the amount will go back up again.
Yeah, I expect that too. That's why I'm trying to marry the whole need versus what's funded. All right, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, just one footnote, real quick. I think Peter hit it on the head. The Department of Housing and Community Development has modernization monies for state public housing authorities and complexes. It's a little bit unique to be using federal community development block grant funds for some of the things that he's talked about. I think there was a pressing need there, but I'd say, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the exception to the rule, it's not the rule that you use. And it's up obviously to the CETA board and the Board of Selectmen, but there's a separate pool of funding for modernization that's held in Boston for modernization of public housing facilities. And then there's a separate pool of mini entitlement grants that goes through a number of formulas. But I'd have to say, Peter, in your experience, I mean, how many times has CDBG funding been used to, improve or modernize public housing areas?
You know, it's been very episodic. It's been, sometimes it's been used frequently, then at other times, and this is coming out of the same state agency, but different divisions of the same state agency, Department of Housing and Community Development. Then there have been periods of times when the state has said, you absolutely cannot use community development money for public housing authority improvements. So they have been inconsistent in it, but it is certainly not a primary use, and this was, I think, a rare opportunity to do it.
I'd like to thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you for particular information. Trying to get back on schedule.
So if you would like, I will begin, or would you like me to wait
No,
for?
could you be our guest and begin?
Okay, my name's Robert Ethier, I'm the health agent for the Wareham Board of Health. I've been with the Wareham Board of Health for 9 years. This is the budget that we're working with at this point. I will say that before I got here, staff in the Board of Health was doubled. I'm mostly working with part-time people. You'll see as I read down through the expenses of the budget, that articles like cellular and different articles in here are paid for myself and my part-time assistant inspector through grant funds through the Plymouth County coalition that I belong to. It's the Plymouth County Health Agents, along with the Department of Public Health and CDC funding, who pays for my telephone. They pay for the cost of the telephone throughout the year, and that's been like that for 6 years, so that helps out with the budget. They also pay for my computers, my laptop computers, AEDs that I distributed through the town, so it is a good source. The money there is somewhat drying up also, so I'm a little concerned about the future budgets. But I'll start off by saying that under personnel service, the total cost for salaries is $162,142. Advertising here, it's self-explanatory. That's in this business, we have to change our regulations, which requires advertisements a certain amount, a certain number of days as per the regulations, and that's usually $300 a year. All office supplies, that's around $1,600, and that's for everything you need to operate the office, the mailings, whatever you need. Let me see, $1,600. Now here's under other purchase services, that used to be a lot higher. And what is paid for under other purchase services is the Cape Cod VNA. We hire out a Cape Cod VNA service, which is a lot cheaper. Historically, we've had nurses in the Board of Health, and by the time you pay their salary and their benefits, it far outweighs the value. So it's been my experience since I've got here to contract with the Cape Cod VNA. The total amount of the contract is $15,000 a year. Now, in the Board of Health, we get notified by doctors and hospitals, and as much as pediatricians and veterinarians about disease reports. That's required by the state. If the person has a reportable disease, it comes to the Board of Health. It has to be handled. The forms have to be filled out. Everything's compiled and sent back to the DPH with an answer to how we would approach that. And that's done by the VNA. The VNA puts on 2 to 3 flu clinics a year for us. And some people here that have been there can see that it's done very well. Nobody waits anymore. And the other service that they provide is every Thursday next door at the multi-service center on the 5th floor. We have a clinic to check blood pressure, to give people injections. They bring their medications with them, and the nurse there will do that. So that's all covered under this. I noticed that it went down from the request that I had for 13. It's, well, I guess it's, excuse me one second. The other thing that goes on that other purchase services is we have the Cape Cod VNA, and we have a sharps collection program. CMAS contacted me in my first or second year here and said that a lot of people are getting stuck or pinpricked with needles that were used by diabetics and for other purposes, cancer injections or whatever, and they would like them out of the waste stream. So working with our our volunteers at the recycle center. We set up a little shed, and they've done a great job. We instruct the people to put their needles in a certain container and tape it off, and it's put in there. Now, this is another thing. When it first started a few years ago, I was granted $2,000 from the coalition to get the program started. That money's out now. It's not in my budget anymore. So the rest of that money that's in other purchase services goes to paying for that. And that could be as much as $600 to $1,000 a year to pick up, drop off new containers, and incinerate what we've accumulated over the last few months. So the total year is $600 to $1,000. Repairs and maintenance, that's just repairs to copy machine that we have. We have an agreement, but in case that some of the stuff doesn't cover that, then that's in there. For the vehicle that I drive, that's not in good repair and needs replacement badly, that is covered in some of the expenses there. Vehicle supplies, the same thing for tires and oil changes or whatever. And that's about it in the total budget. I would like to ask for another part-time person. At some point, I was asked to do a level-funded budget, but we're working on regulations, and people are expecting regulation changes that deal with nitrogen and other things in town, so we're working on that, and if that ever happens, that's going to require someone to oversee that program also, either a part-time person or a full-time person. The other thing is, I tried to work on this last year. I have a program in mind, and that's a housing inspection program. We spend a lot of our time on garbage and nuisance complaints. Substandard housing is rampant in Wareham. It takes up most of our time. We have a grant from CETA that pays for a part-time gentleman that does 4 of these a week. He's 19 hours, he does 4 a week. Sometimes in the summertime we get 10 garbage and nuisance complaints a week. And that deals with everything from garbage in the yard, the land, or the house, according to the state sanitary code, all the way up to condemnations. I would like to get a program eventually, if there was ever some money to put into the Board of Health budget, to have a part-time person to deal with the nitrogen if the regulations change, and a part-time person to deal with housing issues. If we had a housing inspection program, I estimated anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000, depending on the rentals. There's a lot of people that rent in Wareham. They rent illegally, not according to the state sanitary code. That code expects that a renter and especially a landlord comply with the code. That means the temperatures at certain times of the year in the house have to be this, and they're not in a lot of cases. You have to have screens on all the windows, and they can't be broken. And the front doors and rear doors have to have screens on them for ventilation. That doesn't always happen. We find complaints everywhere we go, from not supplying the proper fire equipment in the house, or carbon monoxide detectors, or whatever it is, porches that are not adequate, or room sizes that aren't adequate. So someday in the future, that's my goal, to get someone to handle all of these and to have income coming into town. And now when we're called out, there's no money that we gather from any of these, it's just time out from doing public health stuff, dealing with garbage and nuisance complaints. So in the future, we'll be able to charge for a permit that says, here is your state form, this is what you meet, and this is good for the landlords also, because if the tenants don't keep up with what's on that form, then the landlords have a form that says it was good when I went in there. So also, it would be a moneymaker, and we would not be going out for nothing, we'd be making money, and it would cut down on all these issues. These landlords don't know that there's a code, most of them don't. They're in other towns, they bought it at auction, and then they just send somebody in there. So that's our goal. And I'll entertain any questions or answer any questions for any one of you.
Mr. Trudell?
Of course, I'd just like to say that I see nothing but favorable comments in the newspapers, so whatever you're doing, it seems to be working well.
Thank you very much.
You mentioned more help. Do you have a swag on the cost of that employee?
Not at this point. I do have it on, I have a whole workup on this program, and I would think that,
Just a swag.
Yeah, I would think that anywhere from $150 a day for this employee, and per week, if it's a full-time employee plus benefits, I think that's somewhere around what it would be, anywhere from 40 to 50,000, I would think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown?
Well, Mr. Chairman, being the liaison for the Board of Health, I can tell you right off, your budget is so far under budget, it's ridiculous. If anything becomes a part of the nitrogen, you definitely are going to have somebody to work on this thing, this project alone. But the housing money that is out there and available, and it's really our, as a citizens of Wareham, it's our responsibility to make sure that people are renting safe housing, and we don't have the manpower to inspect it. If they're not funded by Mass Housing or HUD, these landlords are getting away with unbelievable stuff. And even if it's a HUD or a state, the city of Boston and many other cities charge, every time you turn over a unit, they charge $50 to go in and inspect this unit to make sure it's up to the state sanitary code. And there's a lot of state sanitary code violations that are definitely happening in our housing stock right now and are not being attended to. And I would strongly urge the town administrator to look into this budget particularly, because we're always talking about safety for the citizens of Wareham when it comes to the police department and this. But this is an area that is truly getting neglected. I've been in his office, and he's had an inspection to come out, to go out and look at, or whether it be a Title V, and he couldn't go do it because there was nobody in the office to cover it. So I hope I've made my point that this budget is seriously underfunded.
Mr. Trudell, I believe you also indicated. I'm sorry, Mr. Paulson?
Mr. Paulson came before me.
I know, I see Mr. Paulson. Okay.
Why not use the senior work-off people? I mean, we have some people that take cameras out, take pictures of dilapidated properties and bring them back in. I'm just curious if that's been thought of as a possibility.
Please. Answer the question.
Well, some of these sites are quite dangerous, for one. You really have to have a knowledge of the code. Most of these involve court cases. That's how bad it gets. I'm in court now on an average of 2 times a week, just on housing issues. And I think you really need a background in enforcement. Some of these people aren't very happy with you being there, and it is quite difficult. So I would say, nothing against the senior work program. I think it's great, but I just think that it's a little bit more involved than that.
Well, let me just pursue this just for a moment. We've got about maybe 70 or 80 people on that program. Is it possible at least that maybe 1 or 2 of them might have some background that would be satisfactory? I don't know.
Yeah, well,
But at least I mean, we're saying we have a problem, we don't have the funds, and I'm trying to figure out a way myself to to address the issue. I understand your point.
yeah, I would say that you need a background in public health for one, and you would need a background in housing for 2. And it's just not something you can go down and write a letter and say, you know, this is, you got to understand the code, you got to understand the Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations. So you really need somebody trained.
All right, thank you.
Don?
One of the great things about this budget process is, as I went through earlier, and I marked off the departments, and I didn't see anything on your page, and I put no questions. Then you started talking. And so, the big problem I have, remember when I look at other purchase of services, and you're saying that there's $15,108 in the budget, you already covered the $15,000 with the contract for the flu shots and other services you do, and then you had a Sharps collection, so you're already over budget. And our goal in life in the town of Wareham is not to go over budget. So I don't know if there's any plans to increase his budget to actually cover what is is pretty much a standard expense or not, I don't know, but that's one question. Then you mentioned the vehicle, and they have repairs of $1,300. How old is that vehicle?
That vehicle, I believe, is 2003.
Okay, and what's wrong with it? That $1,300 is a lot of money to repair a vehicle, so
Right.
is that enough? Well, I guess that's the
Well,
real question.
I was just at the DPW yesterday. It doesn't come out of four-wheel drive for some reasons. They're gonna look at that. It's just constant problems. Now there's a knock in the engine. I talked to both mechanics yesterday, and they said, you're gonna have to drive it because we're not gonna be able to afford a new engine. It's just gonna have to go till it stops. It was well-used. It's an old EMS vehicle that was hand-me-down, and it's been used, and it's seen better days.
When I first, my first foray into any kind of a committee was I was on that, the Buzzards Bay Coalition on nitrogen pollution, and I've been following, obviously I'm no longer part of that, but I've been following this, and if these nitrogen regulations go into place, there's gonna be a serious need for enforcement, is that correct?
That is correct.
So you're going to have all kinds of issues on that side as well, unless we add another person, or you'll have to come up with some sort of a thing for that, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
Okay. Then the other thing, you mentioned this inspection services, and I'm all about revenue. I think that's one thing the town really has to look at, is how to generate revenue. Have you seen any other towns that have this type of program?
Yes, I have,
Okay.
and Barnstable's one of them. Some of the bigger cities, they have housing programs, and between the fees and the fines, if they're not up to code, it's not me bringing them before the board and then taking them to court when they don't. It's fines right on the spot, or you're able to close them down. There's still issues with the people that live there. You can't throw them on the street, so you try to get compliance any way you can. But yes, there's other towns that are quite successful,
Right.
and they don't answer 10 of these a week.
Okay. Something maybe we could pursue as well.
Any other questions? Questions?
Well, just a point, it's a very important point, that the Department of Housing and Urban Development spend $500 a year for one inspector to come out that is trained in a REAC inspection. And to answer your question, Dick, is basically the codes are changing constantly. You pull cords, you're this, you're that. And what he's facing is tremendous. It's a tremendous, and there's a lot of systems out there that are not nitrogen, but they're put in for wells that are too close to septic systems, and they had to put systems in. They can't even get out and inspect them. I know of some that aren't even working. Nobody's been out there to look at them. So, public safety, I see this as, well, you can see I'm passionate about it. I really think it's a way to generate income and make sure that the people in this town that are renting clean, sanitary places.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Trudell?
through you to Health Department. Okay, you told me 40 to 50K annually for a person as a scientific wild guess. So the next logical question is, for another swag that says, how much revenue would this person generate? And realizing it goes into the town coffers, so it kind of disappears in his rate.
Right.
But, do you have some kind of pie-in-the-sky number that says, you know, if I go out and spend $40,000 on an individual plus benefits with printing with 50, 70K level, how much return do I get out of this so I know what the net cost mentally is?
That's a good question. I tried to work it up based on housing programs in other towns and what they bring in. It's hard to even know what we have out there for housing units. It really is. But I know we get a lot of complaints. If you go by the 100-something complaints we get every year, and that's the average. And we do find them now. But if you go by that, I would think it's anywhere from 20 to 40,000. But I don't know the number of what's out there. And that's the income. But certainly, in the interest of public health and safety, you'd have more time to deal with the public health issues. And now is a lot different than it was 10 years ago. Now we're charged with all this money that's coming to us from the state for computers and phones and phone money. They expect us to be prepared for infectious disease outbreaks, for terrorism outbreaks. We meet once a month, we have training. It's all included in distribution of vaccine in the event anything happens. So we are constantly training for that, and we have deliverables that we have to meet that are hard to meet when you're running out doing this stuff. So if we don't do that, the money dries up from the Department of Public Health and the CDC. So when you free your time up on one end, you're able to do other stuff and get more money in. So I think it's a win-win situation if ever that can happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other? You good? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Thank you.
It's the harbor master.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just briefly introduce this. Gary will give you an update of the department. On the worksheets that were not administered before we produced the worksheets would be a $2,000 stipend for the harbor master pursuant to my direction as he has coordinated and produced a Safe Summer 2011 with the lifeguards. So that's standard fare for what we have. So we'll have to add that in once again after this worksheet was produced before that disbursement was made to Gary. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Buckminster.
Hello. Good afternoon. Now, please, I'm sorry. If you would, the floor is yours.
Okay, just a breakdown on the budget request. I had a few line items that did go up under my request. Obviously, payroll has gone up because we're in a step process now with the two new, myself and the assistant harbor master, so there's a couple grades that we have changing throughout the year here. So to offset some of the costs, my payroll did go up. Part of my request is actually going to be a transfer of funds to come to the requested amount that that my request was on the, as proposed to the administrator's request, which is $243,426. My request was $267,125. I'd be requesting a $25,000 transfer out of the HSP funds to offset half the cost of the seasonal personnel, as we did last year. That will give me staffing for evenings, weekends, give us 2 boat operators. The boats don't leave without 2 people on it. So that will, my numbers reflect a request of transfer of funds. The overtime, it went up not very much. It's only because of the pay scale change with the assistant harbor master for his call-outs, coverage, overtime, storms, things of that nature. I did add, going down into expenses, for the most part, they were all, they just reflect the same request as last year. I did do an increase in the building supplies, in equipment supplies that covers soaps, detergents, things of that nature to keep the bathrooms sanitary. It also covers vehicles being washed and boats being maintained and things of that nature for cleaning supplies. I increased the equipment and building supplies. I apologize, repairs and maintenance because of the cost of just doing business with the marinas. Winterizations, repairs, shrink wrapping, general repairs that we can't do in-house that we actually have to have the marinas take care of. The new, obviously all the new motors require computer components, things of that nature, so I did request a increase on my line item. I put boat and fuel, boat and vehicle fuel as a separate line item. Last year it was taken out and incorporated into other energies, which Mr. Trudell caught me on last year. I put that as a separate line item at, I believe yours is 77. I requested 9,000 because fuel costs, I have to buy fuel at the marinas for the bigger boats because it's not cost effective to haul the boats out every time to fuel them up. They're just too big and it's not safe to continue to pull the boats out once a week. We're at 9,000. Okay. Cellular phones, just the contracts and fees. You'll notice a drop in other energies and propane. That was because I reduced the gas out of it and transferred it to a different line item, so that's been from 7720 down to 2,000. And the other one that I did add in, which was a substantial change, was dockage space. And that is because we don't have a town facility that I can safely keep our assets at. I mean, we've got a $225,000 boat, I can't leave it in Onset-Pier. I just like the place, but it'll be on the bottom. So unfortunately, I do have expenses with the marinas to pay dockage. They're very good with me on working pricing out on it, so I do need to keep it. It's a secure location, they have cameras, they have security guards at night, so just as a safety factor, and I felt that was one of the things, and that's been proposed over the past few years prior to Mr. Andrews, that we needed an item strictly for dockage, and that never came up, so I did insert it in at this time. I had some questions I believe you wanted to ask also on the budget.
Any questions, Mr. Trudell?
Thank you for being here. There was, in previous years, the question of storage of your boats and the capacity to not only store them, but for you to be able to work on them.
Yes.
Given the constraints that the town was under, progress on that seemed to be zero. Has it gone forward?
We really haven't looked into it yet. The storage facility is obviously a work in progress, and I think it's something that maybe in the next year or so, if we come into fall and start at least getting the engineering plans drawn up for a complex that, it doesn't have to be large. It can be, say, like a Morton steel building where we can do work inside. Right now, all of our work is done outside. Most of the boats we can winterize ourselves. We have, I know how to do some of the mechanical repairs on it. So we've cut down on some of our expenses because we can do it ourselves with some of these boats. However, like I said, the other ones that are a little more advanced, we can't handle. So work-wise, fiberglass repair we can do. We're working on markers. We're building docks. So all these winter projects, if I could get them inside, that's great. Right now, fortunately, we're in the weather, but docks can be built inside, things of that nature. So at some point, yes, it would be nice to start looking into something that can handle these.
I know that we lease to, I think it's Atlantic Boats.
Yes.
Part of the Tremont Nail complex.
Yes, we do.
And then you talk about the engineering work of getting a facility. Has any thought been given to what we garner for lease money versus what it would cost us for another facility? And would that facility be useful to the community?
I used the Tremont Metal Building in the past prior to Atlantic Boats leasing it. They use the whole building. It's an extremely expensive operation because of the heating system in there, things of that nature. Buildings, I think it dates back to early 80s, I'm assuming, somewhere in there. So there would be some modifications. I mean, if they ever were to move out of it and we divided the building or whatever the town sees fit. I mean, we've used it. We had our boats in it for one season. It worked out well because I was able to keep the temperature stabilized. So we had gel coat repairs I did, and we did just general maintenance. So all winter long we were able to update it. But I think it would be better to have our own facility, and we work so much with municipal maintenance on different things. Because of the size of their equipment, moving docks, it's just convenient being with them. So.
Mrs. Brown?
Thank you for coming, Gary. I've got a couple of, actually, 3 questions. First one is, what kind of income do you generate?
With everything, dump stickers, I believe we're at around 345,000, somewhere ballpark. That's with dump stickers, shellfish permits, mooring fees, and some of the new fees that we established. On the harbor service permits themselves, we generate about 120,000. About 24,000 of that is generated through the per foot when you break it down, because the boats that are on moorings, they pay the $60 fee, then they pay a per foot fee on top of it. And that that 23,007, it's 23,707. That's how many total feet that we have in boats that are on moorings right now. And then the fees collected for the permit itself is about 95,000.
Okay. Now, I see that you requested,
May I interrupt? Mr. Andrews, could you have a schedule prepared for us with those numbers, please? A
Sure thing.
document that
Yes.
will tell us exactly
Sure.
what those revenues were.
Absolutely.
All right, for our next meeting, please?
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman, it's a question that was just raised a couple
No,
seconds
I
ago.
understand, but I think it's something we've had interest in, and just...
Sure thing.
Since you, that's why the question came up. So if you could, that would be just fantastic. Sorry, Mrs. Brown.
you had $5,400 that you requested for other purchase services, and you were adjusted to $3,800. What type of services did that include, and what might not you be getting because you're down to $3,800?
I actually, if you have a copy of that, I do need the adjusted, because I didn't see the adjustment. Is it in here? Just to go offhand on it, it's going to be things like contacting, we usually have to have divers do all of our town moorings.
Right.
That we do this inspection process on a yearly base rather than a 3-year base that we require with the town, because we put other people's assets on our moorings. So we pay for our divers to go check, make sure the moorings are done. If there's expenses with chain, shackles, pennants, things of that nature, we try to make sure that that's every other year we're replacing that. Moorings that we extract right now, we don't have a fee structure set up to try to get back that money, which that's actually part of my proposal. But if we have to get larger moorings out, we have to contact a dive service to go in and actually extract those. That helps us maintain the chain on our navigational markers. We have probably about 100, we're up to about 100 navigation blades right now between red and green nuns and cans, no wake markers, swim buoys, things of that nature. So, I mean, we're using basically thousands of feet of chain every year because of the small gauge that we're using. So those figures are pretty accurate with the amount and the cost of it, because galvanized chain, you're looking at $1,000 a drum, and we go through 2 a year. So
My question is, how are you going to be able to live with that type of an adjustment from $5,400 to $3,800?
well, that's going to be requested through the change. If I can go with the town administrator's request if I could get support in transferring the funds to operate my seasonal personnel, and we leave the expenses as they're listed here. So it would be on the town's end of it, my budget would be reduced by $25,000 out of the seasonal payroll, and then I would request to transfer $25,000 into that, but that would offset the figures that are changed here. If we could leave the expenses the same and change the numbering around into the payroll.
So what you're saying is you can't live with that number, that it's going to
I
have
mean, I
to
could,
be rearranged.
but things are expensive, unfortunately. I mean, we don't get many breaks on it.
I'm not questioning what you're saying, but I'm just saying, if this is an unreasonable number, you know, we want an accurate number. And if this is an accurate number, how can you possibly, well, in essence, what you're saying is you're going around the back way to fund what you really need, but you're not getting it on paper as we see it. And I want to see how you're really getting this money. I want to know the intricacies of how you're getting there.
Right. Well, I mean, I can't answer for the town administrator on the changes of the two proposals. My figures are just because of work practices and expenses. I mean,
Well, I understand that.
You're looking at $100 an hour for dive services and things of that nature, and just the general expenses we incur from steel and costs of maintaining what we have, so.
Mr. Chairman, also as a footnote, if I might, this, as we've talked about, is a starting point, and there will be adjustments made. And I firmly believe that the people who are paying the permits and fees to use the docks and the systems, we ought to reinvest that into the docks and systems and use it for maintenance of what we have through the Harbor Master's operation. So certainly, you know, we can make adjustments, but the idea is that Gary's a little different kettle of fish, if you will, because he's taking advantage of fees and mooring and other permits that are being collected through his office. It's a little bit different than, you know, the library or some of the other departments that don't have that ability. So it's just a starting point, and, you know, working with Gary, I'm sure we can adjust the lines to fit, to keep the budget not only balanced, but to keep it workable from his standpoint.
And I am working just within the bylaws that were proposed, that were accepted for the use of the funds, because it's all regular under state law. And I believe last year we had to submit paperwork talking about how the funds are used for it. If we can use it to offset, as it states in the bylaw, to offset costs associated with the Harbor Master Department, one of the big pushes was payroll. And that's where, like I said, if we can do the adjustments here in the expenses end of it and make our changes in personnel services, if we could fine tune that, that would be great. Obviously, it's a work in progress.
I just have one more comment, Mr. Bucket, Minister. Let me just add that you do a remarkable job. You do a fantastic job. I have never heard one negative comment about you or your department.
Thank you very much.
And me as a town taxpayer and belonging to this town, I appreciate all the good work that you do. But the only thing that I want to see is, I want to see the real numbers. If you say you need $5,400, if you tell me you need $5,400, I'm like, I know this guy. Well, I don't know you personally, but he must need it. And we want to see it funded accurately for you, because you do run a tight ship, and you do run a...
It's tough to, I hate to, and I'm not trying to bounce around that, but it is tough to gauge, because, you know, like this year, we have to do a big replacement of chain. I've already placed an order, I think it was $2,200 just for chain alone and some updates. So, I mean, I know I have services that are coming up that will fall within that number this year, and it'll be pretty close to that figure. Next year, who knows? We could pull everything out, and we could be in great shape and not have to use that. So, I mean, obviously, it would be a fund that could be turned back in. So it's just, unfortunately, it's a roller coaster of funding on that line item.
And we have your
Life
number.
jackets,
Your number is
things of that nature.
267, right? So we do have your number.
Let's see, 54, I believe you said it was.
Well, it's $5,400 for that line item, but you're...
No, what I'm saying in total is the 267.
My total, yes, my request was 267, 125.
So we do have his number, right?
Right.
We do have his number. Mr. Paulson, you had a question?
Yes, I have actually several questions, but they're all related. Can you give us some idea as to how many of the various berths and spots you have available for boaters are held by out-of-towners?
We have about, I want to say that we have about 85% is going to be ballpark on what we have for residents on our moorings.
Right.
The remainder is mixed up between non-residents and the marinas. I think last time we checked, we were around maybe 200 people that were non-residents. We've got 54 mooring locations that we oversee, where every area of town is designated into its own mooring field. And actually it's growing, because we're finding that there's so many communities that surround different waterways that we have different mooring fields in one body, like Sunset Cove. So there's going to be 3 new mooring fields that are going to be identified. So we're going to probably look in the range of 54 to 65 different locations. And unfortunately, with the moorings, it's a first-come, first-serve. It is regardless of residency.
And if somebody doesn't use their mooring but pays their mooring fee, I'm thinking now the out-of-towners, they still have the privilege of holding on to that?
They have privilege to hold on to it for 2 years, and after the second year, they either have to give it up or they have to put a boat on it.
And we enforce that?
For the most part, I'm down to 60, I believe 68 moorings now at this point that are over the 2-year limit.
68?
Out of 1,600.
Wow.
So 68. And when you send out a bill, you mail it out to the people, be they in Boston or Lawrence?
Yes, we do.
And there's no extra charge for that service? I have a reason for asking that question specifically. they have to be notified, but the law, as I understand it, does not mean that we have to notify them by mail.
Under the bylaws, I have to notify them, under our waterways bylaws, I've got X amount of time that I have to notify them certified mail. That's where we have to break into the bylaws and start streamlining some things also.
And sending the certified mail, we charge them for that?
Yeah, no, we don't. We put a $25 service fee, well, yes, we would, $25 service fee on top of the,
Okay. And you're thinking of
permits.
streamlining that?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the proposals is, the mooring onlys, I understand people, sometimes they sell a boat and they don't know what they're gonna do with it. So give them a year, give them 2, but I think to make it a little more aggressive on that part, that fee for a mooring only should be doubled. And we talked about that with the Marine Resource Committee on increasing that fee to, let's say, $125 per year for a mooring only. So they're gonna sit there and they're gonna get a bill and they say, well, do we continue paying this or can we continue doing this and move it? I mean, we're operating the biggest marina in the town. So if you look at it, and all these marinas are pushing 100 boats, we're pushing almost 2,000. So, and space is in high demand. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Cattola?
I just want to, Mr. Chairman, clarify what I'm reading here. So the regular salaries, the 159,623, that's going to be covered in the budget. And you're saying the harbor service fee is going to cover the part-time and the overtime?
This number actually should be on the 168 end.
Personnel expenses have to get adjusted.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I'm on my figures for the 168,000. That's going to cover vacation days. I'm sorry, holidays, things of that nature. So, I believe they're going to have to be adjusted for expenses.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. McDonald?
Oh, boy, the last. First time, is this the first time we used that fund for personnel payroll?
No, it isn't. We used it last year also.
But before that, did we do that in the?
We have used it in the past, yes.
My concern is that, you know, we're talking about a building, possible building,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking, I don't know what you have as far as capital items going out 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
But a lot of the cost that would normally fall under something else could be paid for with that as well.
Could be, yes.
And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to use it,
Right.
because at this point in time, we have to use whatever we can get. Apparently, we're just gonna have to do that. But I see that you talked about a building, and that's a huge expense, I think.
Correct.
And that money, instead of looking at it as a long-term, looking at it as a capital expense to the town, it can be covered by that fee.
Yes, it could. And
So-
the thing is, with the money that we're collecting through those fees, if we, right now, we're, at this point, we're in pretty good condition, you know, with the exception of keeping up some of the waterways and the markers and things of that nature. I don't foresee having to go for any huge items at this point.
Okay.
You know, we were talking about possibly doing something like a mooring barge to try and eliminate the costs of doing divers, because trying to line them up is crazy. But if we actually have something in place where we can go and manage each mooring field, where we can extract and do this stuff, that I think that would be my biggest expense in the next 3 years anyway. So hopefully we could sit there and increase, you know, look at the different fees that we're collecting now and build that source up, and then we could look into that a larger capital item at that point. But I mean, I don't see a building within the next 5 years. I guess I can throw it at that. But if we could limit the amount of money that we're pulling out of it, with the exception of dealing with some payroll issues with the seasonal personnel, which I mean, they're my left arm. They're that important. So if I can use some of that money to offset those costs with some minor requests, I think we could probably establish that fund enough, and you know, just through shopping and just really seeing what we need for a building, I think we can get the numbers in a pretty reasonable fashion.
That's kind of where we're going, is like
Yeah.
we manage that fund.
Yep.
And appropriate, and obviously you need these part-time people out
Yes.
there, however you're gonna get them. The other thing is, without increasing any of your fees, which I think you just did recently, this last year, was that?
We added different fees. We didn't increase the brunt money, which was the harbor service permits.
Do you see any other revenue sources? Is there anything that's untapped? I'm not talking about.
Oh, yeah, we, when you break down the other towns, it ranges unbelievably. We have, the town of Marion, their fee right now is $60 plus $4 a foot. And then they have a commercial rate which they charge for the marinas, which is double that. So they're generating $300,000, $330,000 a year. Then you go to the town of Bourne, and their permit's $70 and $150, but they don't charge for boats on docks. So each one has their own mechanism. The best one I've seen so far was Falmouth, and they have a fee structure which we've been looking at for derelict moorings, reenactment fees, things of that, where if we're going to pull a mooring out, if you want it back, you're going to pay us for pulling that mooring out, and then you're going to pay for reinstatement of it. So I think there are a few issues that we need to break down and get a more structured fees and things of that nature. But I do think that we're pretty inexpensive. The town of Plymouth, he's got 560 boats, and he's charging $8 a foot. So, and that's a pretty big number of questions. So.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Trudell?
Refresh my memory if you would. I recall some docking repairs, but I don't recall in your 5-year plan a request to look at a mooring barge, or I don't see it in this year's plan, ultimately a building for housing that.
The building is in the capital. The mooring barge, I thought I added in as it might be listed as a workboat.
Okay, all right. What I'm curious about is you've traditionally funded everything through your service account.
Yes.
To Mr. McDowell's point, have you laid out a long-range plan for those funds that shows how much you expect to come in each year, how much you're laying aside for your workboat and your building?
Yep.
So that there is some accountability that someone can look at and say, this is a plan. And when we deviate from the plan, both the Board of Selectmen, FinCom, capital planning, and town administrator would want to know about that. Do you have that kind of a setup?
Not into a 5-year, but I mean, that's something that can be generated, I think, quite easily.
Would that be acceptable to the town administrator?
Mr. Chairman, to Dave's point, we've encouraged all of our departments, when you hear from some of the other departments later today, to look at long-range pro forma, to project out the best we can, because in the end, a hiccup could change something. Bessie Park's a great example. I know Gary had to work to change a lot of the docking systems out, to expand the docking systems. That's an investment from the state of $500,000 and $250 locally that will hopefully generate a lot of activity at Bessie Park. And so the point is well taken. We're looking for, within reason, because I think in some cases, I'm not sure anybody around this table can project out, what the stock market's going to do 5 years from now. But the idea would be to get, all the variables in place, project out what they are, because there will be some operational needs, as he's indicated, and then take those out of the equation and say, at the end of the day, we can afford whatever he'd like to put in place.
And to follow through on that,
Yes.
one of my concerns happens to be his vehicle fleet, which he traditionally is also funded out of that
Yes.
account, and I don't want to see him fall behind on his operational needs versus salary. That's my concern, is because of the vehicles and the boats and the long-term planning. This is the second year we've tapped into that account, and I'm beginning to get nervous in terms of kind of like what I wanted to see with the CPC. I want to see some kind of a long-term plan that kind of calms my nerves in this area, if you will.
Certainly understand that. Certainly understand.
Mr. Paulson?
Well, two questions. Dave just touched on it here. How big is the account currently, and how big will it be?
Right now, we're sitting at it on about 81,000. We will, by the end of usually about, I want to say August, we'll have another 120,000 on top of that.
But you're taking some,
I would be requesting, if I could request 25,000 out of that, so we'd
so you'd
be
be up around
pushing around
200,000 plus
200,000.
25, so you'd be at hopefully
About
about
175.
175. Okay, and the next question deals with mechanics. You mentioned Falmouth, I believe it was, that has a plan that looks attractive in terms of how they charge.
Yes.
And you used the word for us as inexpensive. So how do we go from inexpensive, where we need money, to, I'll use Falmouth, to Falmouth? Can you just do that unilaterally, or do you have to go to?
I didn't understand what you're saying though on the,
We have a fee structure.
Mhm.
You're looking at different fee structures.
Correct.
Right, and I thought you used Falmouth as an example.
I did, yeah, Falmouth's got the most, they're broken down the most of all the other towns around us. Their fee structure is, they've got probably 20 different articles, because they own marinas, they do a few things, but for the fees that I see that they offer, I think that's something that we should do too,
But
besides
you,
this.
okay, and you characterized us as inexpensive. So I take the inexpensive, and you're suggesting again that maybe we should do something like Falmouth. How do you get from inexpensive here to Falmouth, if Falmouth is the model? You recommend it and the selectmen pass it? I mean, we need
The
money
selectmen
now.
the selectmen are allowed to, I would have to propose it, and the board of selectmen would have to accept the fee.
But that's
change.
about all that's necessary?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say about all, but
I think it's like chapter 4, is it chapter 40, 22F, I think it is.
yeah.
basically, if you would recommend it, the selectmen would look at it, and they would say yea or nay.
Yes,
And we have the possibility of having more money come into the town,
yes, we would.
more money into the town in the near term.
More money into that fee, that harbor service permit, we would, yes.
Okay, well, that's a question, yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Any further questions? They said it all, I don't have to say it. Thank you very much, Mr. Buckles. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Members of the Finance Committee, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk about the Department of Inspectional Services and specifically talk about some of the budget items for fiscal 2013. Last year was an extremely busy year for the Department of Inspectional Services, with many permits being pulled for both residential and commercial projects. Although the real estate market has been detrimentally affected by the current economy, the town of Wareham has seen continued good growth in both new construction and improvements to the existing housing stock. Residents have not only continued to expand their current homes and vacation properties, but we also witnessed the construction of 35 brand-new single-family homes, and other residential project consisted of the completion of the 40B projects, along with an expansion of Union Pond, permitting 40 more affordable housing units, and a $1.5 million renovation of Depot Crossing. On the commercial front, the Real Estate Development Division of 80 Makepeace celebrated the ribbon cutting of a new six-office building, with another one of similar size slated to break ground this year. Other approved projects include a new hotel, a restaurant, bank, and pharmacy, as well as 2 new solar projects. Many of the area's malls, including Cranberry Plaza, Wareham Crossing, and the Shaw's Plaza, saw the interior renovation and fit-out of many new businesses looking to locate in the town of Wareham. Several new businesses and eating establishments located in the Wareham Village and Onset Village, giving residents and visitors alike more variety and shopping options. The breakdown in permitting and revenues for 2011 were building permits 867 for a financial gain of $172,071, plumbing and gas 970 permits issued, for a total of $63,635. Electrical permits, 421 issued, for a total of $50,000. Weights and measures continues to remain pretty consistent at $5,270. That fluctuates a little bit year to year based on the fact that the meters at the department store, the scanners, have to be inspected only every 2 years, so sometimes there's a little bit of a fluctuation there. The revenues coming in this year, at the halfway point, we seem to be trending at about 30% increase over last year in all the disciplines, with building being at 104,000, wiring being up to 33,600, weights and measures being around 2,000, and also plumbing and gas permits being at around 35,000. So the outlook for this coming fiscal year is very encouraging. And as far as the expense side, we're looking for a slight increase over last year from 278,000. The administration is recommending 280,478, which primarily represents the increase due to collective bargaining on the personnel services side, and the addition or the re-addition of a $25,000 line item in the demolition fund. Currently, we do not have a demolition fund. I think people who have closely watched issues like the Sandwich Road property realize that sometimes it's important to have a demo fund residing in the building department, as you can't realistically expect to expend city funds on private property without the lien process taking place. But I would like to take that a step further and use that demolition money as a 10% match to pursue some grants. It's always been one of HUD's national objectives for removal of slum and blight. Under the town administrator's leadership, we have formed a task force and looked at a number of properties in town that really should come down. We've had pretty good voluntary success in having the owners of those buildings take several down this year that we noticed were in a hazardous condition. We issued a make safe order. They do have their choice of whether to make it safe through renovation or demolition. A couple of them, it was kind of a no-brainer that demolition was the route to go, as they didn't have a lot of redeeming value left in the buildings, as they had sat abandoned for many years. So that's something that the department is hoping to maintain in the budget this year. Due to some shortfalls last year, it was removed, but we're going forward now with the plan this year to try and have that as somewhat of a revolving fund. So that stayed in there. And other than that, we've pretty remained consistent on all the expense line items. And under capital planning, we've looked at, some small areas of capital, such as and priced out like a carpet replacement. We're looking to potentially put in for a vehicle replacement where all our vehicles are 2005 or older. We currently have 5 employees using those town vehicles and only 4 vehicles. One failed to pass inspection for over a year, so we share that vehicles, and we share the keys to those vehicles. So the other thing would be talking to our copier company. We currently own our copier, and it's under a maintenance agreement plan, but several offices are looking at some of the different lease options that are out there. It's almost cheaper to lease. I talked to him briefly about the age of the copier, the expected life expectancy, and we're going to continue to get by with that copier printer, but he said you probably would get maybe this year out of it before the expense of maintenance and new parts started to outweigh the benefit of looking at a potential lease agreement. So those were the, and also we have a computer need for the customers with the online permitting. If they can enter their permit online, it will populate many of the fields that save the customers and the general public a lot of time. Some do it from home, but when they come in to the desk, we have a kiosk that we're setting up that we hope that many of our contractors will take advantage of. It will expedite the permitting process for them and also allow us some spare time to help people in plan review and things that can't be done on the computer. So the new plan for to enhance revenue streams, again, the town administrator is always pushing us to look for potential new revenue streams. I really, in the cost analysis I've done, feel that we need fee increases across the board for all disciplines. I have an analysis of the 10 surrounding communities. We could expand that a little bit, but it's clear that Wareham is kind of at the bottom tier, the bottom 25% in those 10 communities that surround us, so that when you're dealing with contractors that do a lot of work regionally, I think they would be in agreement that those fees need to be adjusted. And some of what I suggest and will suggest to the Board of Selectmen that can ordinance those fees and those increases really help the homeowner that's under enough financial strain with all the increases that they're facing and betterment fees and taxes and the economy, etc. But look to capitalize on some of the good commercial development that we have going on and some of the one-time fees that are really just a user fee. And the example I give quite often is the sign fee. We're really low. We've utilized the ability to adjust that as a cost per thousand. For instance, the Makepeace signage, I believe, was over $100,000, and to charge them $35 a side won't generate much in the way of revenue. So they were understanding at that. Most of them expect it. When I deal with sign companies that are dealing all over the state and sometimes nationally, they are in strong agreement that our fees need adjustment. So I will be presenting that this month. It's 7 years since the last increase, and they looked at historically they get adjusted in January for whatever reason. So I'm prepared to go in front of the Board of Selectmen at the town administrator's urging as soon as they would like to potentially adjust that. The other permit fee that kind of came our way by way of the state just requiring a sheet metal permit for work being done. They've said that at $50 and $100, and that we expect could generate upwards of $5,000 or $6,000 a year. But the big one is that we took over trench permitting at $75 per trench, and normally that wouldn't be such a big deal, except that with the different phases that we have with the sewer projects going on, it should generate between $15,000 and $20,000 annually for the department. So, and it gives us a better sense of what's going on out there, and we can track where these trenches are being opened and closed on a daily basis. So those are some of the things that I think would enhance the revenue for the department, and I'm prepared to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Questions? Brown?
Mr. Burke?
Yes.
You provided us with a lot of information, and you've obviously done your homework, and you're doing, looking new sources to generate revenue. would it be possible for us to have the schedule that you gave us as far as what's being brought in from the electric inspections, just the inspections itself, that way we would have a better understanding? You've explained it to us, but it would be nice to have a package. Can we get that from you, Mr. Andrews?
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman, to you. And I think it's important for the committee to have it, as well as the Board of Selectmen, because I want Miles to just expound upon one thing about the signage, because I'm not sure the complete nuance was illustrated. We're putting up signage, we've got businesses coming in, we've got a new business park, we're collecting $70 on a major sign on frontage on a major highway. And if you could just expound upon that, Miles?
Yeah, I mean,
in another community, what would that go?
In other communities, they're used to paying upwards of $10 or $12 a thousand of evaluation of that sign. There's a caveat at the bottom of the fee schedule that was passed by the Board of Selectmen that allows the building department, if the fee does not seem to be within the industry standards, they can look at charging them $6 per thousand is what we charge on our building fees, both for residential and commercial. I would like to see that split a little bit and a little more weighted toward commercial. I know we have a flat tax rate, and that attracts a lot of commercial development and a lot of commercial interest in town. I think that's great. But on the building side, if you look at most of these communities, and I'll be happy to provide that information to the committee as well, it looks like most communities use a split rate and expect the commercial in it. And I think they expect it as well, as when they're doing some of this big commercial development, that there's a little bit of an increase in doing business because it's a one-time fee. And they realize, as I said, the homeowners are burdened with a lot of other fees and expenses that go along to owning property in town. But this is kind of a one-time user expense that when they build, they incorporate these fees. They do pass it on, I'm sure, to the end user and consumers in a way that they have to do business. But so on the Makepeace sign, it would be the difference of maybe a couple of $100, $240 versus, I believe, we settled at around $700. And in other communities, it varies so much on the signage, like Greater Boston, but I'm saying even down here in different Cape Towns, they're saying they're used to paying at least a couple of $1,000s for a sign package of that type. So it's things like that, things like, on a deck fee of $50, that's great for the homeowner, but when they were doing a whole condo deck, we made sure that we charged per condo and realized the actual fee was very consistent in the end with what they pay in other communities. And so we're not looking to really gouge any developers or commercial operation, but it just seems that in a time when the town needs revenue, and I would like that to translate into more full-time staffing, and by doing the right thing with the fees, I think that would generate the right amount of money. So that signage was one that was really glaring.
And we'll get that information out to the chairman for the committee.
Mr. Paulson?
Staying on signage for a moment here, if I understood you correctly, you said it's about 7 years since the last fee increase was put in, or?
Yes.
Supposed
2005, January.
So you can go to the selectmen and suggest a new fee, presumably higher. What about doing something like this? How about, I'll pick a figure again, I'm good at picking figures. Let's say that you decide the fee should be $300, just for sake of example. How about saying that the selectmen, it's $300 the first year, the following year it's $310. The year after that it's $320. In other words, try to incorporate into the fee structure something to overcome the fact that we may not go back for 5 years, we may not go back for 7 years, we may not go back for 10 years. But in the meantime, we're trying to keep ahead of the curve
Sure.
with an escalating fee structure that isn't onerous, but will at least give us something to keep ahead of the game, so to speak.
like a CPI index type of thing?
Well, something like that, yeah. Instead of just saying, well, we'll make it $300 and then we'll come back and revisit it 7 years or 5 years.
Right,
Index it going forward in some sort of reasonable way.
right.
That would be my suggestion, not a question, so much as a suggestion.
There's one of many ways to do that.
Well,
And
okay.
that would be up to the Board of Selectmen. I would hope that they would try to at least also provide for, even if that structure was set in place, that periodic reviews would be required. Mr. McDonald? But it's an idea.
We want to go, let's go back a little bit, because this is one of the ones I think that,
Yes.
if you had to estimate how much you're losing by people doing building, if you will, without going into the net. And what I'm trying to get to is the enforcement side of it, and how much is going to be generated. You know, you're talking about getting additional staffing, and that's one of the areas I think where you have a lot, I don't know, that's I guess what I'm getting at. You
Yeah.
have a lot of it.
To answer that, if they get away with it, sometimes you don't know how to really put a real
Right.
good figure on that. However, I can say, the more we're out there in the field, and I noticed when I was helping with the lifeguard program, I was in a lot of the beach communities on the weekend, and I was catching a lot of weekend roofers, and their question to me was, why was I working on the weekend? I said, why are you roofing on the weekend? And it's really, they could be there and gone in a 2-day time frame, and you wouldn't necessarily see them. We do double fee when somebody comes in. We like to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that homeowners sometimes unintentionally start a project and get into a little bit more than just a conventional repair or doing a slight modification. They find rotted wood or whatever, and so the little replacement of a few boards turns into a new deck, and then when they came in, we're usually pretty lenient as far as just charging them the appropriate fees and moving forward. When contractors do it, we double fee them, because we know right away that they, as part of their licensing training, know that they need to have these permits in place. So we don't have a lot of sympathy. Sometimes it's fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. If you see the same guy out there doing it, we try to be very stern with them. I'm a firm believer, if we're out there, we're protecting the public safety. The numbers reflect, 25 to 2,600 permits with all the disciplines included per year. And I think the electrical and plumbing going to halftime, and now we have one full-time building inspector, which is good. And he grabbed a couple of people yesterday, because we see him coming in the next morning and permitting the project. So I think you're right. If we did have, generate a little more revenue, beef up the staff, because it's a big town as well. I mean, you can spend some driving time going out to a Rose Point or going out to Sarabeth that other communities, being more compact, don't have. But being over 50 square miles, it's a lot of coverage on some of these smaller beach enclaves that people come down on the weekend and they do work, and we probably wouldn't catch them all the time. But the neighbors are pretty good at letting us know about some of the stuff as well, so we do the best we can.
I got one more. Could you talk a little bit about the other purchases, services, other 20,000?
Yeah, that other purchase services, the 20,000, that, because we have part-time inspectors, we utilized that fee to pay for the alternates, and we also, the weights and measures inspector is a contracted employee who just bills for his time. So, as I said, he brings in approximately 5,000, and there was some talk with the former accountant on how that DOR was looking at that. They like to see, weights and measures as just a funded operation of a municipality that they bring in. It's a checks and balances, and it's not really a revenue enhancer as much as it makes sure that we're getting a gallon of gas, we're getting what the price tags say, on the scanners, and the grocery market say on the scanners, so that she thought that that would shift into, he's an employee with the Weights and Measures Fund, paying the Weights and Measures salary. That hasn't happened yet, for whatever that reason, but what it is we currently paying him out of that $20,000, and we also pay the alternate plumbing inspector and the alternate electrical inspector, both, and if we had to contract any secretarial help. I did put in for a half-time secretary that wasn't left in the budget by the administration, but occasionally we have had, besides the senior work-off program, we have had a secretary come in and pay her out of that fund. So that's strictly for salaries of the contracted employees.
Mr. Trudell?
Could we visit trenching fees for a second?
Sure.
Are we talking about someone going from the sewer on the street to their house?
Yes. Among other things, but primarily that's,
So aren't they required to hook up within 1 year? And are they not already being charged a fee for hooking up?
they do pay a betterment fee. They are mandated, I believe, to hook up within 1 year of the sewer being on the street. I think they can get a waiver of some sorts if their septic system was just recently installed within the last several years. They have like a 5-year window or something of that nature. I'm not positive what that time frame is. But the trenching operation that's happening by, not the plumber, but by usually contractors who just basically do demolition, trenching, as well as for underground utilities from the power companies. We're calling them in and telling them they need a trench fee. Some new homes that go in, they need trenching fees, as well as the regular building permits. So it's an additional fee, but it's required under the law that they pull a separate trench permit.
It just seems to me like we're hitting the homeowner that's being forced to hook up to the sewer system twice. And it doesn't seem to me to be fair. He's got this betterment that's come to him. Now he's going to have to hook up. That just doesn't sound to me like a fair thing. You want to talk about a guy putting a new house in, and he's got to lay in trenches for his cables, his television, sewer, water. I understand that, but boy, how hard can we hit the people that are being forced to pick up the sewers?
Mr. Chairman, if I could, because we all, I think, dealt with the traffic issues relative to the Columbia Gas replacement line, to David's point. Now you're talking about a major utility paying us to trench in the street because they're replacing, old cast iron lines with brand new lines. So it cuts a couple different ways. And, I think what Mr. Burke is looking at my direction is, what is our cost of doing business, and how do we maintain that cost if it's going to hit the bottom line at some point. And it's not necessarily going after the homeowners, but once again, commercial developments. I think there was some trenching up in the industrial park recently. So it cuts it a couple different ways.
Okay, those are also fees that are under the purview of the Board of Selectmen, so that's not the town administrator or the inspectional services choice. It's under the Board of Selectmen, so we'll leave that to them.
Mr. Chairman, I do understand that.
Right,
I have two
but-
members of the Board of Selectmen sitting here, one in the audience.
I would
The
rather not
chairman here,
address,
I need to make my point.
I would rather not address members of the audience, thank you.
Well, I'll follow up on Dave's point, and it has nothing to do with the selectmen directly. We're very proud of the fact throughout the state that we're going to start charging Verizon for taxes on their poles. Great idea, except Verizon is just going to turn around and charge us as homeowners, and we're going to pay the fee in any event. I mean, it just goes on and on. And we think, and we're kidding ourselves if we think we're getting away with something, because
No, we're not kidding ourselves.
Well, I didn't say you are.
We're welcoming ourselves to
Well, maybe I
America.
am.
That happens in so many different places. Mrs. Cattouli. Welcome to America.
Just briefly, I think you have answered my question. Your original request for personnel to staff is $20,000 higher. And then there was a new employee request for $20,000. Now I'm thinking the $20,000 additional was a part-time secretary, is that what you?
The new employee would be a half-time secretary, or at least somebody that could fill in for vacation times, for busier times, catching up with some of the administrative work for both the electrical and the plumbing inspectors, administrative side, and entering all those permits into the system and entering all that they have to do based on the town and their boards to record these permits. But we have been using that senior work-off program pretty well to get caught up in the summer months. But also, the plumbing and gas inspector was originally a full-time position, and it was reduced to half-time before I got here. He appears to be doing the volume because he's plumbing and gas, so he appears to be doing the volume that really requires a full-time person in my estimation, and it also would take away some of the conflict of interest regulations that we seem to be dancing around all the time, because as a part-time employee, he is allowed to work in the community, because a lot of communities don't have enough work to fund a full-time position. I feel that this town is big enough, and the volume is certainly big enough, that we should have him full-time, and then tell him as part of that full-time employment, he would not be able to work in this community. They can still take jobs in other communities. Obviously, he never inspects work he does. That's when an alternate has to come in and inspect his work. But I think with the money that we save, not having an alternate have to come in and inspect his work. But I never bring him in just to inspect his work. When I bring him in, I give him plenty to do besides just looking at it. And it also is for coverage when they're out of the office for more than a day. But right now, they're only 3 days a week. So that would be to bring him full-time to 5 days a week, or at least an additional 5 to 7 hours, and then make that other issue kind of moot as far as them being able to work in town. Because it's only available to them if they're part-time. So those were the two things, but money's tight, I understand.
I got you. All right, thank you.
We're running behind, so if you can make this the last question.
I hear perk up when I hear about putting on new employees. If I understand you correctly, and correct me if I am wrong, you're talking about getting a part-timer in there to type out information. When I come in for a permit, and you give me the permit, and then it goes into a box, and then the secretary comes and takes that information and puts it into the computer. Is that essentially correct? There's a question.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Why is it that that has to be that way? Why can't I type in the information into the computer, the permit gets cut off of that, and at the same time, the same information goes in the computer? Why do we need somebody else involved?
Well, some of that is occurring with the new software system. You also have to get all the plumbers on board that want to enter everything on computer, and we're working on that. We're working on not only trying to be accessible to the public and more accessible to contractors to do that type of work from home, or have somebody that's handy with computers do it for them at home. But we also have to work training the public to get on board with new programs and enter it into the program. So that is happening, and there are, after the inspection process takes place, there's some things that get entered into where, okay, you pulled the permit, and the job gets inspected, it passed, failed, license information that now has to be put back in, that it was in a past state. So, with the dates that it was re-inspected.
The question was, and the question still is, you want to hire a part-timer to do something that could be done in a more automated way. That's my question.
I do see that point, but also, it wasn't only for that. I'm the only office that we're expected to be open to the public so that they can access information, file permits, etc., and the only office with only one secretarial person. The nature of the work of inspectional services is to be out in the field doing those inspections, so that you might say, oh, there's 5 people in that department, but in reality, they're out in the field more than they're in the office. So if this secretary, which happened this year, was out for 2 weeks, it's me. And also members of the other staff answering the phone, doing all the things that secretarial staff does with filing, with recording permits, with answering the phone, with dealing with the public's concerns at the window, and with managing the office. So it wasn't just to have somebody, and quite frankly, if that's all it was, I could wait till the senior staff member came in the summer under the work-off program, and we keep them at a desk and working. But be that as it may, I'm willing to continue to work with the budget at hand and try and do the best we can with the staffing level that exists.
Chairman, just one footnote real quick. We are moving towards better software to get to this point. We purchased Hawkeye software system that now makes sure, and this wasn't all the case in the past, that you could be the biggest tax delinquent in town and still get a building permit in this town. So we are working towards that. It is taking a little bit of time to get that coordinated between Miles's office, tax collector, and the assessing department. And that software is already been loaded, so we're working towards getting it more automated so that people can't put their own information in. And then at some point out in the field, I can envision handheld, telecommunications devices that people are doing their checking of the permit, if you will, and it automatically gets transferred back to the department so that we can close out the case. So, but it is also a little bit labor intensive at any given point on any morning. If somebody calls in sick or is on vacation, Mr. Burke and or the other inspectors are at the counter helping people. So that's just a mere fact of the sheer loss of resources in the area. But we're going to work towards what Dick wants and hopefully be able to report to you in the future on that.
Okay. You know what, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Burke.
Thank you.
For a while. So the hope would be that if we could get that position back full-time at the library, that we would enable them to take care of some of those capital things that come up. And the other side advantage to that is we do get a lot of young adults, the playgrounds right in the back of the library in the afternoon. And when there is a presence of someone who could be outside doing their job, cleaning up and everything, it really makes a big impact. I mean, now the custodian isn't there. They're only there on Fridays, and they only come in at 7 o'clock at night. So that time period in the afternoon, there would be somebody available, which I think would make a difference in that area too. So it would give us additionals there. The other thing that didn't make it into this budget as of yet, although I have talked to Mr. Andrews, and he said to remind him as funds may become available, and I will do that, is funding for substitute library assistants. We did just recently, not yet, but we're very close to just putting on 3 substitute library assistants, which will work like subs do in the schools, so they don't have any step hours, but they're there to fill in for when we have special programming, if someone's out sick, if someone's on vacation. Very cost-effective way of providing that additional staffing and coverage without putting on, permanent people. So what I was looking to do is get some money through the town. Right now I'm using state aid funds. It would work similar to the book budget. The town would appropriate a certain amount every year, and we could use state aid to supplement, and that would give us more hours. So that is in there at like 19 hours a week for various people to come in, and that was $13,000. So we tried to look at ways that we could get some salaries money. Of cost effectively and yet still provide the ongoing service that we have. I did include a breakdown of the salaries and with those new positions added in. And I also, the last page is just explaining how those dollar figures fit into the library's long-range plan. The decisions to request certain monies in certain areas was definitely driven by that plan. The 20 hours of custodial services will help us to provide residents with a safe, comfortable, and welcoming physical space, and welcoming the teens to a safe and comfortable space in the afternoons and the after-school hours. And the substitutes will help us enabling those services, like welcoming children in and providing tools to parents and caregivers, all the outreach that we could do. Our children's librarian right now is never able to leave the library because there isn't anyone else in that department that's been enable her to go out and do outreach, which is really important. And obviously the funding for the upgrades to the computers helps with our online services, which was a major component of our long-range plan. And at the end, I just reiterated our status with state aid. Our municipal appropriation requirement for FY12 was $697,589. The town appropriated $411,123. So we have applied for a waiver. We haven't heard yet, but we won't have a hearing. The hearings would have already taken place last week. There wouldn't be a hearing because we actually got an increase. We weren't decreased in last year's budget. But, once again, with this request, obviously we're not meeting the municipal appropriation requirement, but we are making steady progress to continually getting small increases each year, and that's what I've worked with Mr. Andrews to make sure that we continue to do over a period of time. So, that's it.
Mr. Paul?
Talk about long-range plans. And I'm just curious where Spinney fits into this. Obviously not this year, but looking down the road.
Well, Spinney, right now, the status of Spinney is that there will be, it's my understanding that there will be an article at Springtown meeting sponsored by the Friends. The Friends of the Library have a contract with the town that it has to come before town meeting during a certain period of time. So there will be an article, and the article will include 3 years of operating cost for the Spinney. Therefore, it doesn't appear anywhere in the library budget because it's really not going to affect our budget the way it's fixed.
And the cost, just for all of us here?
Please?
The projected costs for the 3 years?
Right.
Yes, but what are they?
Well, I don't have that with me now. It really will be something that will be vetted through the select board and the library trustees in FinCom when that article comes through the process. So it's not coming as part of the library budget. It will come as a separate article. And I did assist them in coming up with the operating budget for the 3 years. So I will be there to speak to that. But it will come under that separate umbrella.
Do you have a ballpark figure?
I believe it's around $40,000 a year. I think they're prepared to do some upfront starting course too at about $25,000 for the first year. So, but that will be coming.
Is that only for the library services, or does it include the building maintenance as well, light, power, and all that?
It includes everything.
Okay. Mr. Trudell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I became a member of the board of the Finance Committee, some 4.5 years ago, I was astounded to discover that 65% of the library budget was in salaries. Looking at the budget submitted here, it would come to 69.7%. And if I looked at the revised numbers that you have, it would become 76.9% of the budget. The trend is not good. In that 4 years, you went 4%, but if we went and looked at it and accepted these numbers, in 4.5 years, we would have actually gone up to an additional 11% in salaries. At which point does salaries consume so much of the budget that it becomes unworkable, I guess is the question. It's a trend, and I think we need to look at the trend.
Well, I think if you look at public library services across the state of Massachusetts, you're going to find that salaries is probably a big percentage of the budget because it's what we do. We provide service, and the only way we can provide service is with people. When people come to our door, which they do, they're looking for help with computers, they're looking help to find books, they're looking help with school assignments, and it's people that provide that. If it was up to me, 100% of our budget would be in salaries, and we wouldn't pay for any electric or any gas, but unfortunately, we live in the real world, and we have to keep eating weight on in the buildings. But we are a service, and it would be not a good thing if we didn't have more money in salaries as opposed to things.
Mr. McDonald?
You know what would really be helpful, just from our standpoint, maybe it's just me, I don't know. It's like when we talk about the revenue numbers, we need to talk about circulation numbers with you, or the number of visits people have, because to me, it's difficult to judge anything just looking at the expense side. You have to look at what's happening on the other side. And with you, I think it's circulation, I think it's the number of people that are coming and using the library. That's very important for us to determine, is it money well spent? If it's not money well spent, from my standpoint, if you said to me, when we had, I don't know, whatever it is, we're spending $7 per person to operate this library, and I could go out to the state level and say, well, they're spending 5%, or something like that, or you say I'm spending 5, and this person over here is spending $12 per person. It's a better, for me, a tool to judge it. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but.
Well, there's a couple of places you can go. Number one, you can go to the town's annual report, because you'll get a capsule of, what circulation was and everything last year. But if you really want to get the nitty-gritty of finances in public libraries in Massachusetts, if you go to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners site and go under their financial data from public libraries, you'll see all those comparisons, and you'll also see how much is spent on personnel services versus expense items in public libraries across the state, and you'll see where Wareham falls with how much of the town budget actually goes to the library. And for the volume of service the Wareham Library provides, we're at a very low town expense level compared to a lot of other cities and towns in Massachusetts. But that's, it's all right out there for the public taking, so.
Okay. Believe me, I think it's a wonderful. I spent my little time on there, but I think that the library has come a long way in the last few years. It's starting to get back on its feet. I think all the groups are working together. So, I'd just like to see what's happening with the people that actually use the library now. Now it would be interesting to see how many people are coming that weren't coming, and something like that is going to give us a better, maybe a warm fuzzy, if you will.
Right. Circulation is off over the past couple of years, and I could certainly get those figures to you. One of the biggest things that we continue to see is the use of online services.
Right.
There's still a very, we had an average of over 400 users a week coming in to use the public computers. It's the only place for people to go who don't have home access, and there's a lot of them out there. So, if we were open only for that alone, I think it would be worth every penny that the town puts into it, so.
Mrs. Cattouli?
I have two questions, one to the town administrator and the other to the library director. As far as the custodial moving to the library budget, are you in agreement with that?
No.
Okay. You don't have to expound on that.
Can I just tell you why real quick?
Sure.
Because then we're going to spice up a couple more custodians for the harbor master's docks and the bathrooms, and I'll be sending people over to other parts of town, and you may as well just dismantle municipal maintenance. We're
Okay.
trying to build it back up again. So I don't disagree that they need additional services, and Denise and I have talked about that, but I'd like the professional municipal maintenance director to direct his staff.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. The other question I have is, as far as the 29,000 and change here, How much is that, is the sales, did you say, 22,000?
Yeah, sales is 22,941 and
22,941.
Right.
Now, the additional charge, the additional is for actual computers, hardware?
Right.
Okay, why aren't those a capital item?
Well, it wouldn't, it's only like $7,000, so it wouldn't be,
That's what I'm asking.
yeah, it wouldn't, to me, it wouldn't be enough to put into a capital
Okay.
item. And it would be so much easier to get it out of our operating budget because it is an ongoing expense for us. You know, ideally, we should be replacing computers and printers every single year.
Okay.
You know, and I just think it would work a lot easier if we incorporated it that way.
Thank you.
Further questions?
I'm good.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Dennis.
I think I would like to subsequently schedule a time for Ms. Maderas to come in and discuss the certification requirements, financial requirements that the state has. The waiver process, this year, everybody got a waiver. However, my understanding is that there are still numbers that are accumulating, even though the waiver was in place, et cetera. It's an aggravating, complex formula. I understand part of, like, she's asking to put the additional salary in. There can be advantages under the formula of doing that are only one-time advantages, et cetera. But it's complex enough that the whole problem of public and private contributions, et cetera. Sure. I think it would help this committee a great deal and open a lot of eyes, all right, to the pressure that's applied to the town by the state to hold the certification. And it's not as, many times shall we say, the red pen in the budget is not as easy because it really does impact the certification significantly.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to schedule Denise back in.
Yes, if we would.
And
It's really
the one thing,
critical to
if you look at
understand
if you look at the bottom line from the past 2 fiscal years, we've put over $80,000 into the library. And that demonstrates, because I've been to Library Commission reviews for waivers, it demonstrates that we are doing our best. I'd be hard pressed to say that communities, you know, that put $80,000+ into the bottom line of their library would not receive some form of consideration. But I do understand, because it is very complex, and Denise would love to come back because she has nothing to do on her Wednesday evenings.
Well, but also, as she said, we're making progress, but we
Sure we are.
still have not hit the state standard. And right away, the question has, well, what do you mean we're making progress and we're putting lots more in, and we're not meeting the standard, and the problem is the standard.
You are correct, Mr. Chairman.
The problem is the standard.
And I think the
people need to know that.
debate on that in Boston has to be wide and long and hard, because some of the standards, some communities won't ever be able to get there. And
Right.
that's
I'd
just
just
a fact of
schedule
life.
that for sometime in February if we may.
Sure.
The earlier, the earlier the better. Yes.
One other question, I know what you're saying about the rundownness of the library, and it's tough getting in there in the afternoon to get tutoring for your kid or that, because there's a lot of kids hang out there in front of that. But have you looked at maybe using that 20 hours that you do have, possibly to do the rehab work or fixing, and looking at maybe contracting out the cleaning? Would it be cheaper to do something like that? And that way you're not picking up any benefits or anything for anybody, and you still got your 20 hours to improve on your building?
See, part of it doesn't really fall under my realm because it is municipal maintenance that handles the cleaning and the maintenance of the library. You know, and part of what we have to look at, which would be interesting during the certification review process, is a lot of things I'm not against centralized purchasing and just I would much rather have municipal maintenance be responsible for cleaning in the building. I'm not looking to fill that role in any way, shape, or form. I've done it before, and it's not a part of the job that I enjoy, so this is great. But part of it is, a very simple thing is, the town is paying for toilet paper, mailing, custodial help. The town is putting a lot more into that public library, money-wise, than you're getting credit for. And the formula does not allow us to put it in there somehow. The only way we can get it in there is it gets appropriated through the library, and the library has that control over it. So it wasn't looking to be in charge of custodial help, but just get the money into the
I
library
understand.
budget so that it's being reflected as it's providing that portion of library services, and that's what would be good to try to work on, and because it is what it is. I mean, that's the way that system works. And you can say, well, it shouldn't, and we should have a way of showing it, but there isn't, you can't.
Right.
So,
Very good.
Thank you.
Can we explain, excuse Mrs. Maderas?
Just an observation, and it gets back to Spinney, but I'll just use the general term contingencies. It would be very helpful to me, and I suspect to the rest of my colleagues, if when we go to town meeting, and this is as much for the administrator as it is for you, that we were made aware of the various contingencies that are about to, when we get to town meeting, come before us. Obviously, Spinney's one. Another one that we heard about today for the first time, at least for me, was that we've got software contingencies coming up that are going to run, I don't know, pick a number, $30,000, $40,000 a year going out for a couple of years. I think that this committee, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me, but feel free if you want to, would disagree that we as a committee and as a town should know what the contingencies are going forward and be planning ahead, because we're going to have to deal with them. And 40,000 here, 30,000 there, it begins to add up very quickly. And so the budget is nice, but the budget, as far as I'm concerned, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, doesn't fully reflect what we might be facing out 1 or 2 years from now. And that's what I'd like to see incorporated into the budget.
We'll talk about that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman,